Hello. Can you hear me?
Okay, we have our committee. Let's go ahead and go live. Thank you so much. At 5:06 PM, I'm going to call the August 16th, 2023 Quality of Life Committee meeting to order. Can I please have a roll call?
Counselor Chavez. Here. Counselor Lee Garcia.
Here.
Counselor Michael Garcia.
Present.
Counselor Villarreal.
Present.
Chair Cassett.
I am here.
You have a quorum, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. Moving on to approval of the agenda, we do have a change. Loretta, what is that change today?
Madam Chair, we're going to be removing item H.
Thank you.
Okay? Do you want me to read that? Or?
Yes, and there was some challenges with caption matching content. So this will still be heard at the August 22nd meeting, but we unfortunately did have to take it off the agenda for today. So if you could please read that caption, that would be great.
Okay. A resolution, consideration of resolution 2023, a resolution proposing 3 ballot questions to be submitted to the city's voters during the November 7th, 2023 regular local election to amend the city's chapter or charter to not discourage discrimination in the policy of human and civil rights, require the governing body to establish an Office of Equity and Inclusion in Ordinance, and require the governing body to establish a Human Rights Commission in Ordinance.
Oh, wait, this is, this should be an H.
So
That's not what I'm
Madam Chair,
saying on mine. Please go ahead.
quick clarification. So item H was actually, it's mirroring almost item I. Item H shouldn't have been published. It was still in draft legislation form before I approved my sponsorship of it. So there's portions of it that should have been eliminated. So that's why H is being removed, and it actually won't be coming back to anybody.
Oh, okay,
Yeah, so it's being
that's new for me.
pulled.
Thank
Yeah.
you. And so what I had for that was the capital program, and that's what I'm showing here. Is it
So
capital
H.
program or is it the human rights? Really, on mine, I have I as human rights. Oh. Okay. So,
There was an error with the
Okay.
publishing of the agenda, so item
H-
H completely removed.
Great.
And what's published, at least what was published prior, won't be coming back before the governing body, nor will the intended finance resolution, because of our time in regards to getting any ballot proposals. The only way we can potentially hear that resolution is if we waive our rules at our special governing body meeting on Tuesday, and I will introduce that motion on Tuesday so we can hear the resolution that unfortunately we couldn't hear tonight.
okay, thank you. So H is the same caption as I. We will be hearing I. Okay, so we're still going to hear it. We just removed H because it was a duplicate of the caption, apparently. I'm not seeing it on this, but I think that's what's on the public agenda. Okay. All right. One minute. Are we, do we understand? Are we ready to move on? Or-
Yeah.
Right?
I'm-
Yeah, okay. Can I get a motion to approve the agenda as amended?
Move to approve as amended.
Second.
I have a motion and second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Moving on to approval of the consent agenda. Loretta, can you let us know what has been pulled?
Yes. Item B has been pulled by Counselor Cassett. Item D has been pulled by Counselor Garcia. Item G has been pulled by Counselor Cassett. Item I has been pulled by Counselor Cassett and Counselor Villarreal.
So much. Can I get a motion to approve as amended?
Can you repeat those?
Yes, we have B, D, G, and I. Anything else that was missed? And if not, can I get a motion?
Move to approve as amended.
Second.
Motion and a second. May I please have a roll call?
Counselor Chavez?
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia? Counselor Michael Garcia?
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal?
Yes.
Chair Cassett?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. Moving on to our first presentation. It is a Narcan presentation, The Science of Fentanyl and Opioid Overdose Recognition and Response. We have Bernie Leaving, I believe, on Zoom. If you
Yes,
could
can you
please
hear
get
me?
the screens up. We can hear you. We can't see you yet.
I have my camera on.
Oh, that's on us, not on you. Don't-
Oh, I see.
We'll get
Okay.
it figured out. Can we get some help getting the screens on? There we go. All right. And then I think we may need to promote Mr. Leaving so that we can see him.
Join as a panelist, I
Yeah,
think.
yes, please. All right.
There.
There we
Hi.
go. Wonderful. Hi, thank you so much for joining us, and I will turn it over to you.
Okay, let me just turn up my volume real quick. And so because I only have 10 minutes, I'm not doing that presentation. That takes about an hour. So I'm just going to give you a quick overview of what I do, where you can get naloxone in our community, and a little bit about the science of fentanyl, just a quick overview, and then hopefully have time for questions. So thanks for having me. I am Bernie Living. I'm the statewide overdose prevention education coordinator. for the Human Services Department Office of Substance Abuse Prevention. I am a consultant contractor. I'm not a state employee. I've been in this role for more than 7 years. I do this work in all 33 counties, Pueblo and tribal communities, and I can train anybody in the state 14 and older without parent or guardian consent who wants to learn how to prevent, recognize, and respond to a suspected opioid overdose using the drug naloxone, or maybe more familiar to you is the brand name Narcan nasal spray. If someone is under 14 with parent or guardian consent, which I always try to get for anybody under 18 anyway. We have the cases of the know, state statute, and of course, before that. All my payments and the marketing that I do, which is now just called the Mountain Center. You can get it from the New Mexico Department of Health office on Letrado. La Familia Healthcare for the Homeless, and probably at La Familia Clinic on Alto Street, as well as the South Side one. If you want to get Narcan at a pharmacy, you can get it without a prescription. If you have Medicaid, there is no copay. But sometimes, depending on the person's insurance, I get calls all the time because copays can be unmanageable for many people. And since my Narcan is free, I can provide that to them. The Narcan that I provide for free is funded through the Federal Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, through the Human Services Department, Office of Substance Abuse Prevention, and the Behavioral Health Services Division. I also, even though I'm a consultant, help the state write grants. So I'm very involved in the upfront work on this, all data-driven work, and my time and the Narcan is funded by SAMHSA through the Human Services Department. Just real quickly about fentanyl. There's a lot of misinformation about fentanyl that has been bandied about for the last 5 to 7 years, that you can have incidental contact with fentanyl that can produce an overdose. That is patently false and physiologically impossible. You cannot overdose on fentanyl unless you are purposely eating it, smoking it, snorting it, or injecting it. Casual contact, by getting fentanyl on your skin, there's a reason we have skin, and it is to protect us from the outside environment, including getting stuff on our skin. The only way you could have an overdose by getting fentanyl on your skin is if you had a prescription patch. And the only way fentanyl is absorbed through the skin is through a prescription patch that has the appropriate solvents in it that allow for absorption through the skin. Even in that case, it's very difficult to have an overdose event because it is released over time in therapeutic doses for the individualized patient that's using it. Other myths about fentanyl, that there is Narcan-resistant fentanyl, also patently false. Narcan is an opioid antagonist. It antagonizes the opioids off the receptors in the brain so that the overdosing person can start breathing on their own again and regain consciousness. There is no such thing as an opioid that is Narcan resistant. Narcan works on any and all opioids, but it doesn't work on any other class of illicit or licit drug or medication. I think that was going to be my quick overview so that there could be some time for some questions if any of you have any. Otherwise, I could continue to expound.
If there's more that you'd want to share, that's fine. We usually do try to keep presentations to 10 minutes and then some question and answer afterwards. So if there's any more that you'd like to share at this time, that would be great.
Well, just so you know, I have, I do lots of trainings in Santa Fe for Santa Fe Indian School, the Santa Fe Public School District, lots of trainings at Meow Wolf. I'm doing one there for the Human Rights Alliance next weekend. Santa Fe Public Schools, if you don't know, authored a naloxone policy 2 falls ago. The board passed that unanimously. I am also available to help with writing policies and procedures for agencies, not only in Santa Fe, but statewide. I would certainly encourage the city of Santa Fe to have Narcan nasal spray at every city-owned AED in town with the first aid kit and the AED and the fire extinguisher. I am happy to provide any trainings that the city may need, and also to provide the city with Narcan nasal spray to have in those in your facilities, but also to anybody who is a city employee who wants to carry Narcan when they're not at work. I can also supply that after providing what is usually about 45 minutes to an hour of an overdose recognition and response training that includes the science of fentanyl, a little bit more detail around pharmacology and toxicology associated with fentanyl. Just as we're on the topic of fentanyl, and then I will stop for questions. Fentanyl is driving overdose deaths in our state, and that includes in Santa Fe. And it is not prescription fentanyl that is diverted. It is illicitly manufactured fentanyl that, because it is an unregulated street drug market, people don't know what they're getting when they use those little blue pills, if you have heard of the little blue pills. I do also provide fentanyl test strips, and we do have a more sophisticated drug checking system at the Department of Health now, so that we can keep an eye on what's going on with the street drugs in our state. And lastly, just to give you a snapshot, I work very closely with Santa Fe Fire on an overdose survivor outreach project that I helped start back in 2016. And while I was talking to, many of you may know, I don't know, Faith Applewhite, she's an EMS captain. We were on the phone the other day talking about possibility of a new project of pre-hospital EMS inducing people onto Suboxone, which is used as an opioid treatment. And she told me that the day before we were on the phone, there had been 3 overdose calls in 20 minutes in the city of Santa Fe, one of which was fatal. So that gives you a little snapshot of not just what's going on in our state, but what's going on here in the city of Santa Fe. So any questions?
Thank you so much, Mr. Leaving. Really appreciate it. Any questions, comments from members of the committee? Councilman Villarreal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to thank Bernie for his work and just the knowledge you bring in our community and accessibility. And I think it's just extremely important. And I guess what I would like to see for us is for staff to be able to understand and know how to use Narcan and administer it. I've been to events where they give you Narcan just in case, and I have it in my car, and I have no idea how I would use it if I came to that situation. So it doesn't help to have it in my car if I'm not able to administer it. So I guess I'm just curious. I don't think that's Bernie's question, but if there's maybe a push for staff, not just in certain departments, but just so folks that are interacting with the public really should know what's happening, not just our emergency response teams. So maybe staff could give a little bit of insight on that.
Madam Chair, Councilman Villarreal, thank you for that question and point. I think it's an excellent one. We have
done some training with naloxone in the libraries, so librarians are trained, but I do think a larger conversation with HR and maybe the wellness team on training broadly for city employees, especially those that are public-facing, would be useful. And I don't know, Chief Johnson, I'll put you on the spot. If you have anything to add on this topic, since you're very knowledgeable, Bernie, Assistant Chief Steve Johnson from the EMS is in the room.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the question. Certainly, it's good to see Bernie leaving on screen. I took a harm reduction class from him years ago as part of our startup in the fire department with harm reduction and our naloxone program. It's a good training. It's straightforward. I would fully endorse it for sure. Yeah, it's along with other life-saving measures, stop the bleed, CPR, those kind of things.
Thank you. I know that maybe we can think about that because I have taken the CPR classes. And they fold the CPR with the, what did you call it?
Stop the bleed.
Yeah, and I think maybe this could be a component of it. I'm not sure who could direct, because I think that goes under, what department does the training? Because it's not HR. It is, why am I not thinking of it?
Is it, Madam Chair, Councilman Villarreal, would it be risk?
Yes.
So I'm happy to have that conversation with Miguel Vigil from Risk and the Deputy City Manager who's overseeing Risk at this time to move that forward.
Yeah, that'd be great. Thank you. That's all I have. I don't really have specific questions other than for myself about how I would handle situations, and I'm not prepared. So I appreciate you, Bernie, and the work you do in community, and I have no further questions.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that, your kind words. And I would just answer your question by saying, if you grab the Narcan box, it's got a glue dot on the front where you can actually open the box of Narcan and see in 3 steps how to, call 911, roll the person on their side, and give Narcan. And if you're willing to do so, rescue breathing. So if you are in a pinch, call 911 and open that flap, and it can guide you through.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Councilor Lee Garcia?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Appreciate the presentation, Mr. Levine. I think that would be great if maybe you could share your contact information with us in the manner that sometimes we maybe asked by constituents about this very topic, and we can at least share your contact info or the information that you gave us in terms of where to go, who you can call, La Familia, Santa Fe Mountain Center. All those are great. Maybe just some contact if they have some
Yes.
questions, as we did.
I would like to be, seems like I can't put my contact information in the chat, but I will give it to you right now verbally.
Thank you so much. We have an email on our leavinggroup@gmail.com. Is that the correct one in the
Yes,
caption?
that's my consulting company.
Okay, and is that the best way to contact you?
That is the best way, or I'll just, for the heck of it, you
Yep,
can
do it.
call 505-270-5943. And that number is on multiple state websites for Narcan anywhere in the state. So, and yes, please, so the point of my saying that is please share my contact information with constituents.
Thank you.
'Cause you can reach people that I can't reach.
Thank you for that. And it is very troubling to know that we are in such bad shape with this very, very serious drug, and people don't realize how it can affect you and take you in just a moment's time. So thank you for the presentation, and we do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, Counselor. Any other questions, comments from members of the committee? I just have a couple follow-ups. You mentioned call 911 and open up the box. Are the people that answer at our ACC, are they trained to talk somebody through administering Narcan? Might be for you, Chief.
Certainly, Madam Chair, I believe there are pre-arrival instructions through our dispatchers that will coach people if it's available how to do that. And like Mr. Leaving advised, it's very clear directions on the box. If you have a kid, it's pretty straightforward.
Wonderful, thank you. And then my only other question, does Narcan expire? So if we were to have them all at the city sites, would we have to, keep track of how long they've been there and replace it?
So yes, Narcan does have an expiration date, 3 years from the date of manufacture. But having said that, studies have shown that not Narcan nasal spray, but pre-hospital expired naloxone is 90% effective 30 years after expiration.
Oh, wow.
So expired Narcan is better than none. If we were to do this collectively together, we would have a system in place whereby about 6 months before your Narcan would expire, could do a trade out so that I could take the about to expired medication and get that out into people who are using street drugs or people who have a prescription who are high risk, to get that medication out before it expires and replace yours with one that had another 3-year shelf life.
Wonderful, thank you. That's really good information, appreciate it. Any other questions or comments before we move on? Thank you so much, Mr. Leaving, for being here. As Councilman Villarreal stated, really, really appreciate your work in the community. Really important and challenging issues. And thank you so much for being such an advocate and working so hard to get this information out, get Narcan out into the community, and do as much harm reduction as possible. So thank you for being here.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me, and I appreciate the very kind words. Have a good evening.
Thanks, you too. All right, moving on to our next presentation. It'll be update on affordable housing supports, upcoming projects, and current initiatives of the Santa Fe Civic Housing Authority. Do we have Ed Romero with us? We do. Oh, hi. Oh, Ed Romero, come on over. Thanks for being here.
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thanks for your interest in public housing. I think most people think the city is public housing, and the city is not. And so we are going to have the real deal here tonight to tell you all about it and answer any questions you may have of what they do and who they are and what they've got on the horizon for upcoming projects. So I'm going to let Ed talk about this first slide. This is a bunch of factoids. You can look at everything up here. And
Oh, Ed, if you can talk into the mic or else they can't hear you on the Zoom. Thank you.
So the stats up there are just what we've accomplished over the last 10 years, but I think the key issue is how we've transitioned from public housing to partnerships that hold the same units, but at a new recapitalized value and to both the tenants and the city within partnerships. So public housing initially, probably 20 years ago, or when we started this thing 10 years ago, had about 541 units in Santa Fe. We demo disposed some units on West Alameda and did a mixed finance property there in which we picked up vouchers as well as put public housing units back into that site. And then we proceeded through a process called RAD, which was HUD's process of capitalizing public housing. And that process, what we did is we sold public housing units into partnerships with entities that receive tax credits. And through that process, we pushed out about $110 million worth of redevelopment of all our sites into what we have now. And I want to say there's 8 to 10 partnerships that we belong to. We actually own less than 1% of the property, but we are the general manager, general partner in the partnership. We're responsible for its operations for the next 45 years. And there are underlying requirements that we would have to re-sign up for another land use restriction after those partnerships come out of play, after they've already delivered their affordable housing for that required period.
So I wanted to also just touch on what is public housing in the big context. It was originally created as a jobs program as part of the New Deal in the 30s. It was expanded under the Housing Act of 1949, and it quickly became a very effective segregation tool until the Fair Housing Act of 1968 made that illegal. And Ed can speak to this way more than I can, but by the mid-1970s, the government support for public housing started to contract, and we haven't had an expansion of resources for public housing since then. This led to underfunding and austerity. Ed can speak to every year, and this is why he went into this, the RAD program, the Rental Assistance Demonstration Program, because every year HUD would say, oh, we can't give you as much as we gave you last year. But meanwhile, he still had the same number of units and the same number of vouchers that he's trying to support. So that is kind of what led to the decline in quality of public housing around the country. And so it's a pretty common experience for public housing to have obsolete buildings that are in rough shape. And so when Ed came on board, he really reformed the public housing that we have in Santa Fe, and I would say it's some of the nicest public housing in the state. And with that, now you get to see some pictures. You wanna talk about-
That picture up on the top left and right are our West Alameda project that was a senior prior to demolition and replacement. And then how do I go to the next slide? And this is what came in after the demolition of those sites. So everybody's familiar with Camino del Campo. We have 10 units, 10 two-story units on one side, 28 units on the opposite side. The 28 units were built LEED Platinum, and those particular 28 units are net zero sites. So we generate more electricity, and it's strictly a full electricity site than we use at that site in a yearly basis for all our residents. That particular, the 107 units, we took down 104 units on West Alameda plus 3 offices, replaced it with 110 units on the site closest to West Alameda, 60 family, 50 senior. Then our phase 3 was the Campo Alegria, which is the 28 units that we just talked about. And we built 10 market units because we had to go to the bank to finance the last 10. So we replaced it with about 148 units, plus we got 107 vouchers in the demo process. Roughly, I want to say probably 130 of those units are affordable, plus the 107 vouchers. So we turned 104 units into, 240 affordable units for residents that needed them here in town on that particular project. From that project, we went off to the Hopewell Man neighborhood, as well as Cerro Gordo, Gallegos Lane, and Senda de Valle was our next project, 120 family units that got reconverted into 120 family units at a cost of, I want to say that project was somewhere in the 12 to $14 million to bring them all up to speed as well and roll it out for another 40 years. We also did the 2 senior sites at Villa Hermosa on Luisa Street and Pasatiempo, where our main office is located. There's 237 units that we built there as well, or rehabbed there by converting to this RAD process. So we no longer have public housing units, but we have units that serve the same AMI criteria, the same below 30% AMI people that need those homes, only now they're living in units with air conditioning, units that are all electric, and most of them have no electric bill or no utility bill, whereas before they were paying utility bills as well, which is a huge hit for very poor families. When utilities go up in December and you get hit with a gas bill of $200 and your rent is normally $100, you're staring at basically eviction because we can't let any of our units go offline like that. So we've solved kind of that problem, built much greener, and restored, I want to say probably 99% of our portfolio that needs to be addressed, that needed to be addressed when we came on board.
I also wanted to talk a little bit about the partnership with the city. And Ed, I think I missed a few sites, but there is an interesting relationship between the city and the Housing Authority. Once upon a time, the Housing Authority was a division of the city government, like the County Housing Authority is still a division of the county government. And at that time, many of the first projects were built, so the city owned the land and the Housing Authority was a division of the city government. It emancipated quite, not long after that, but the city retained ownership of the land. So the Housing Authority owns the buildings and manages the site and takes care of it, and the city owns the land. So we have lease agreements for those sites. How many sites are there, Ed?
There are 5 sites that have 100-year leases on it with the city, and we have them subleased to our partnerships for, I think they're 60 years. We fully anticipate that those properties will be coming back in for a recapitalization probably in 30 years or so, and require another, kick the can down the road, get a lease, an expanded lease from the city, give a new lease to whatever partnership we establish to recapitalize and move that forward.
And I was also hoping that Ed could talk a little bit about his preservation work, because not only has he rehabbed and redeveloped several of these sites, but he's also bought affordable projects that were either their affordability periods were expiring or they had some other reason why they were financially vulnerable. And I think that's really important.
I think our first development process was in Casa Solana. There was 16 units owned by a local church that was keeping them, and they had turned into kind of an affordable senior complex. And the church decided that it just really wasn't in their, that wasn't something that they wanted to continue. The units were falling up, they were having issues, there were roof leaks, there were window leaks, they were renting them for $200 a month, and they really couldn't afford to put $40,000 in roofs when they were getting $3,200 a month. So they chose to sell it. It turned into an article in the newspaper. We struck a deal with the bank, not with the bank, but with the church, in which they gave us a long-term loan with no cash, with a balloon payment after 5 years. We worked something out with the city at the time that gave us some money to do some minor rehab. We guaranteed the residents could stay for the next 5 years as long as they applied for our voucher program. And we rehabbed the units, kept the residents. I think we kept 14 of them at closing. There were 16 units. We have 3 of them that continue to live with us today, almost 20 years down the road, and they're not paying any additional money out of their retirement funds that they were back then. So that was our first project. We purchased 9 units from St. Elizabeth's about 1.5 years ago with kind of the same. We work out these kind of financing deals where we tell them, okay, we'll pay you in 5 years. We use that money, instead of using that money to make a down payment, we use that money to try and rehab those units, get them up and going, and then we go back to the banks and finance them and pay off the church or pay off the St. E's for that project. And then we've picked up a few houses around town. We picked up a group home out off of Pacheco Street that we currently have leased out to Lifelink, that they house, I want to say, 6 or 8 people within that group home. We also are constantly looking. We own, land off of Rufina that we just closed our second phase of that we're looking for future development. Land off of Ocate, that again is part of our future development that we'd like to get going. And then, of course, we have St. Catharines that we purchased in 2017.
And that's the last slide.
Wonderful. Thank you both so much. And Alexandra, I did forget to introduce you. This is Director Alexandra Ladd, our Director of the Office of Affordable Housing, if anybody is watching for the first time. Thank you so much for the presentation. If we could get those slides to get uploaded onto PrimeGov and sent out to the committee, that would be wonderful. And I'll turn it over to the committee for questions and comments. Villarreal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I just wanted to thank Mr. Romero for all the work he's done in our city. I think I would have to say he's one of the few entities or leaders that are actually producing public housing development and affordable housing units. And that doesn't come very easily. I think that he's pretty savvy about getting different funding sources to make the projects work. And so I just wanted to thank you for making that happen, because I feel like the projects, you didn't even give the exhaustive list of all the projects that you all have been part of that are supporting people on fixed income and seniors in our community. And there's always a waiting list, we know that. I just appreciate that you're able to realize and actualize units and affordability for our community. So just wanted to say that. And then my question to you is if you could just tell us maybe just a snapshot how the Civic Housing Authority, the projects that you've been part of, have benefited from the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and how it's that those funds have leveraged projects, and maybe you could give us some examples.
Well, one, we had Via Consuelo. The Via Consuelo site's behind the Lauterberger off of Swiss Road across from Walmart. It was a 100-unit complex built in '72 that the Housing Authority has managed ever since then. It had, I want to say, from when I started for about 15 years, every time it rained, all my maintenance staff and I were down there trying to beat the fire department to the flooding that was occurring there and the other issues. We got tax credits for that particular project in 2018. We started the project in 2019. COVID hit. We had a fire at the site that burnt down one of the buildings that was like 70% rehabbed already. So the projects are super expensive to begin with. They required, probably, I want to say 30% of the total cost of the project. You have to have soft funds, meaning funds that you don't necessarily have to pay back, or you pay back at very favorable rates. We'll get a home loan that's for $500,000, and it'll be a 0% loan, 40 years, but you still have to pay the $500,000. But that's a lot better than 6% at the bank, and a mortgage that on $500,000 would be, I don't know, somewhere in the neighborhood of $3,000 to $4,000 a month. So we pieced together all of these soft fund processes. We put the deal together. We get into construction. Boom, on comes COVID. We get hit with a fire. We get hit with delays. We get hit with all of these other things. We applied to the city through that affordable housing. Got, I want to say 200,000, maybe it was two batches of 200,000 to help offset the $1 million cost change order that we had to sign to get the project into play. So, we're grateful for that particular project. Our second project that comes to mind right now is Calle Resolana, the 45-unit project behind Days Inn. That one experienced some of the same kinds of issues. We got stuck into a long entitlement process with the neighborhood, and we had to negotiate special easements with the neighbors, and we had to commit to lots of other expensive things to put that project into play. And part of that process was we did come back to the city on that one and asked them for money, and I think we got $200,000 for that one as well. Again, costs that were just have been spiraling out of control over the last 3-4 years, which is nothing new to you guys, but we went from building units at 180 a square foot to right now, or even in that project, it was right around 225 a square foot. That $45 on 40,000 square feet just makes it extremely hard to keep it moving forward. So we're thankful that the city participated in helping us with that. The Sail the Soul is an older project that was built in '97 as a partnership between the Housing Authority and a tax credit developer that put them in. And part of the deal there was we had a right of first refusal if they ever wanted to get out on that site, and I forget the other apartment complex down the street. Anyway, there was another complex that had 114 units. Well, we negotiated with the landlord to take Paseo del Sol, and they took the other one, and we gave them like $100,000 for the 60 units. And we got a project that was 20 years old, but in still much better shape than the public housing sites that we had, because again, HUD just choked us off by just not funding those correctly. We were struggling a little bit with that particular site because we had roughly about $1.2 million worth of deferred maintenance in the project. It's not managed by the Housing Authority. We continued with the management entity, Monarch, that's running it. But the problem there is you can't get commercial loans for properties. I can borrow $1 million on a house here in town for 30 years, but I can't go to the bank and borrow $1 million for a 60-unit apartment complex for 30 years. They'll give it to you for 5 years, they'll give it to you for 8 years, but it makes it really hard to stabilize particular projects. And we looked at going back in for a tax credit process, and if we took that property into tax credits, it would have cost the Housing Authority $3 million worth of cash to create this soft cash to make that deal work. So we chose to do the project ourselves, cut it down to about $1.5 million, deal with the roofing, deal with windows, deal with stucco, and swamp coolers. We went to the city and we received $500,000 on that $1.5 million. So we matched it with 2 to 1 to get that money. But what we did was we guaranteed that we would keep the affordability at, I think it was 80% of AMI, whatever the affordable. So if we need to move forward above, the 30, 50, and 60, when that particular LURA wears out, which will be in about 5 or 10 years, we would not go over 80%. So we retain this affordability for that particular property, which sits right across from Capitol High and is a great, it's 100% occupied, and it's moving forward really nicely.
Thank you so much, and there's so many more other examples through the years, and so I appreciate some of those recent examples of creating affordable units and also rehabbing. And then the one last question I have is curious about the St. Catharines property, and what's the status, or what's its use right now, and if you can share what's the plan for the near future.
The use right now is we're just trying to plug holes and to keep it from having considerable damage so that we can get it in a position where it can be rehabbed. Right now we are procuring entitlement experts to help us walk through both St. Catharines and the Rufina properties so that we can move forward to some kind of units on the Rufina stuff and some kind of rehab to try and save the buildings at St. Catharines. What that is, I don't know. We've kissed a lot of frogs in the 7 years that we've owned it. We've had people that claim to be relatives of the Walmart family that were going to fly in and tell us how to do things. We had another person that wanted to build the Harvard of the Southwest for high schools on that particular campus, and she had people that could do it. We've had developers come and say, "Oh, we can develop it to you and sign it." And inevitably, all of them had some kind of flaw in their plan. The one actually wanted to do an orphanage, and their pitch was they were going to get the Army Corps of Engineers to fix the building and preserve it so that they can do this orphanage for children from the Middle East. All of these people had really no idea how much money is going to need to go into that project and how much revenue that particular project is going to have to make just to pay for the maintenance on 7 very old buildings that are beautiful, but they're very old buildings, and there's no way you can put a school into it. You know, there's a reason that the other school chose the rail yard as opposed to choosing this particular property. There's a reason that many schools haven't come in forth and said, hey, we want to do this. It's a project that's probably going to be, $60 to $80 million. It's a project that we don't necessarily want to run, but what we want to do is entitle it so that developers will come and say, okay, now that it's entitled, we want to participate in that. So we believe from the day that we bought it till now that this piece of property, the only way it's going to get redeveloped is if we entitle it and then seek a partner, as opposed to a partner who's not going to purchase this property because they're then under the same requirements that the Housing Authority is of trying to keep it from falling apart until they get it set up again. Because there was numerous partnerships, but none of them wanted to pay the $3 million or whatever they were selling it for prior to this, and accept that there's landmark buildings on that site, that there's historical units on that site that they can't just knock down. So our goal, hopefully we'll be able to convince the entitlement people in the city that this is the best way to move about saving St. Catherine's before it becomes before we go too far and we just aren't able to put the funds or the system together to save those buildings.
Thank you for that. I know it's complex and it's an amazing property too, and the history there and the architecture. And I hope you find that partnership, because I know it's been a while and COVID didn't help. And yeah, there's a lot of potential, but you're right. Everybody has a lot of great ideas and doesn't mean that it can come to fruition. So thank you for continuing to look at options. That's all I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman. Councilor Michael Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Romero, for coming before us. I appreciate all that you're doing to not only make affordable housing available in Santa Fe, but really make quality affordable housing with some of the redevelopment and refurbishments of properties, especially, I think, the Consuelos place.
Thank you.
I saw that taking place. I grew up in that neighborhood, so it's night and day from what it used to be. So thank you for providing quality housing to those residents. It was mentioned earlier that your shop and the city were united as one. And just for public awareness or public knowledge, would you be able to give some historical context in regards to why there was that division? And
back in '89, there was the discussion to separate from the city. I don't think that the city looked at public housing as a great kind of asset that was worth anything other than headaches that they had. I think that the director at the time, his name was Mike Varela. I think he had a great vision on what he thought could happen if you took off the burden of being a housing authority that was a department within a city that, to be real frank, you guys buy a car for one of your vehicles and that might take you guys 6 months. We buy a car, we go get 3 bids, we follow procurement, and we have the car when we need it. Well, when you get into development, you have to make those decisions on millions of dollars with contractors and architects and engineers. And If you delay that decision, now that $1 million costs you $1.5 million, or it costs, so it created an environment where there's a little more willingness to take some risks, a little more willingness to move things forward that really aren't possible. An example would be Santa Fe County Housing Authority. They're a entity of the county. And that, I would tell you, is the main reason that they have done no development within the county. And we would love for them to do some development, but they've done no development for the last 20 years. Their only deal that they did is they sold the units off of Highway 14. They sold about 114 for $6 million, and they still have the money today. Because they just can't piece it together or have the slimness, the ability to work quicker that perhaps being attached to a jurisdiction slows you down.
Right. The red tape that comes along with bureaucracy.
Yeah. Not that we don't follow that same red tape. We follow the same procurements, guidelines. We follow all of those other things. But at the end of the day, it's my board and me that make a decision and move forward.
Great. Well, thank you for providing that context for not only for myself, but for others. As the city looks to invest more resources in the Affordable Housing Trust Fund and in general, I guess I got a question for you. In regards to development, how bright do you see a future for us in regards to actual units being developed?
That is a good question. We bought Ocate 3 years ago, and we went in for the round right away. And then, again, COVID hit, inflation hits, all of those things. And it's made it extremely difficult. We felt like we could do a project if we got $1.5 million of soft funds from you guys, from other people to make that thing work. That number probably is about $3 million today just because of those particular things. Can we do it? Yeah, we'll find a way. I mean, we'll just keep turning over rocks till we get the right amount. And part of our success is that we just didn't take no for an answer. When we wanted to do West Alameda, there was city people that didn't want to do it. There were councilors who questioned our ability. There was your city manager said there is no way this housing authority can pull this off. So it took a long time to talk you guys into it. Then it took a long time to find other funding sources. Then it took a long time to find partners, and we got it done. I think we're in that same situation now where we built our first couple, then we started riding that wave because we had people wanting to do business with us. Now we're in a position where there's a lot of us wanting to find somebody who has money, who has and wants to give us a premium to build projects, and we're going to have to get more competitive again.
Okay. That there is definitely the need for units. There's, at least I can speak from my perspective, the desire for us to begin to meet that need. And I think a partnership with your shop could help begin to meet those needs. We have a supply of units that just is not even coming close to meeting the demand. And I think that is where we need to begin to shift focus on in regards to boosting that supply, not only for affordable units, but for workforce housing units. I think that's, I don't want to interrupt you.
We would love to do an affordable housing project. In fact, we have one on the table right now that we're talking with Alex about that would combine a tax credit with 40 affordable units, see if we can work something out that works, that financially we can make happen behind Ocate, because we also like that location for workforce units, walking distance to the hospital, to lots of things that are happening out there. So we're working on that. We set a goal that we want to build about 600 affordable units over the next 10 years or so, mostly to protect our voucher program. Our fear right now is we see more and more landlords that are pulling out of our program because right now, if you go to rent a one-bedroom unit, I think you're paying about $1,600 a month. And it might be a fancy or a brand-new apartment complex, but the landlord that has owned a place for 30 years is saying, why should I rent to you for $800 when it's $1,600 over there? I'm worth at least $1,200 for my 30-year-old, not that great kind of a house or apartment. And the more that inflation eats at our voucher program, the more vouchers come off the streets, and the less people we totally serve. So our goal really is to get to where we own 600 to 1,000, or control, I guess control would be the right word, control 1,000 apartment complexes that we can say, okay, we are going to prioritize vouchers for this particular site. And our best example is the Calle Resolana property. We finished that property and we gave preference to 12 voucher holders. So they went to the top of the list with their vouchers so they could come and live in our site, because those 12 voucher holders had a voucher for 3-4 months and they couldn't find a place in the city. We issued 400 vouchers 3 months ago, and we housed 10 people out of it. 10 people out of those 400 people found an affordable housing unit within our guidelines in the city. So what we see happening is if we don't build and control significantly more units, we won't have a place to send our voucher people.
You know, and that's a challenge I've heard is there's the availability of vouchers, but not the availability of landlords accepting the vouchers. And so I guess last question, have you ever thought of raising the value of the vouchers and working with the city to potentially supplement those voucher values to actually be somewhat comparable to market rate?
Currently we're at 120% of FMR. So we're paying like $1,200 right now for a one-bedroom unit. And we're still having this particular problem. The problem is that if you increase by $400 a month, say we went to $1,600 and we brought into play these market units for our people to live in, $400 a unit times 100 units is, what is that, $40,000 a month, $480,000 a year. That would eliminate $480,000 worth of vouchers that could go to somebody else, because HUD doesn't say, okay, you know, you need another $500,000, they give it to you. They basically have given us the same amount for the last 20 years, and we've seen 1,200 vouchers carved down to 670 vouchers through that attrition, because HUD's just not giving more money for vouchers. They're not giving more money for public housing. So the only way to get back to it is to build units that we can rent at $1,200 a month, and we control the inflation on those particular units.
Gotcha. Well, thank you, Mr. Romero. I really appreciate some of the answers and clarification you provided. It's really helpful. And I think, you know, the challenge of working towards addressing our affordable housing crisis we currently have is not just a city problem, it's a community problem, and it takes us collaborating with community partners such as yourself to help us get through this and help us come out successfully. So I hope we can continue to collaborate with you, and I wish you success in all future endeavors. No other questions, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Romero.
Thanks so much, Counselor. Any other questions, comments from the committee? Thank you so much, Mr. Romero. Really, really appreciate you coming here and providing this update. I know I learned a lot about things that I wasn't aware of, so really appreciate you taking the time and all the work that you do. Really need you.
Thank you. You know, if anybody wants to come out and do a tour of the sites, take a look at what our units are now and what our plans are for the future, we'd be happy to host you.
Wonderful, thank you. I'm sure many of us will take you up on that. All right, let's go ahead and move on to what's been pulled off of the consent agenda. The first is item B. It's a request for approval of a memorandum of agreement between the City of Santa Fe and the New Mexico Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department, MNERD, Forestry Division, to establish a collaborative framework for implementing wildland hazardous fuels reduction and forest health projects on city lands. This MOA would supersede and terminate a previous joint powers agreement between the City of Santa Fe and MNERD, share number 000.12272. We have Kyle Morgan from Emergency Management here. Alan Hook is not here, I don't think. And Nathan Miller, our Wildland Superintendent, is here. So thank you all for being here. I just had a couple of quick questions. You know, when we had conversation about the watershed and discussing the wildfire mitigation up there, and there was this conversation about, you know, how things had changed in terms of the process after Calf Canyon to really ensure safety, and that there wouldn't be these challenges. And if I'm understanding that there is some potential for controlled burns here, and I was curious how that process that the Forestry Service had provided would basically be replicated, or what that would look like if the city is doing it, if a contractor is doing it, for us to make sure that that piece is covered.
Well, Madam Chair, to answer that question right now, part of this MOA does not have anything to do with prescribed burning, is what we're moving forward with. Does it happen in the future? It could. And one thing I will for surely assure you guys is that the process that would go through to approving everything will be the same process that was brought to you guys in governing body a couple months ago from the Forest Service. There is a lengthy process that needs to be completed to make sure that every T is crossed and every I is dotted, to make sure that we're not having issues that we had with Calf Canyon and Hermit's Peak. So, but as of right now, basically this MOA is just allowing us to go in an agreement with the state of New Mexico to have a way to be able to transfer funds back and forth, to allow these projects to start commencing and taking place, to start the fuels reduction portion of everything that we want to do, not only in the watershed area, but also Talaya Hill is one that we've talked about doing and working with on getting some mitigation done there to help out the homeowners in that certain areas.
Wonderful, thank you. And then when I was talking to Mr. Hook, he was, you know, telling me, to your point, that this is not just about burns, that there's other ways that we have these mitigation processes. And I was hoping you could tell us a little bit more about what those look like.
So, Madam Chair, yes, what we can do to alleviate, you know, doing some of the prescribed burning, if it allows, is, you know, maybe chipping the material, having the material actually removed completely off-site. Talking with Alan in the last couple of days, you know, we're getting ready to do some projects with the city to help create buffers and fire safe areas around our city infrastructure for the water department right now. And if we come to tuition and need to actually have that material removed, they have contractors already set in place that can come in and actually remove all the green waste and get rid of it on that behalf. So those are some of the things that we are actually looking at doing. And honestly, the easiest way to do it is the way that we will do it and take care of it. That will be best for the citizens of Santa Fe.
Wonderful, thank you. And then the other piece, when I was having conversation with Mr. Hook, really had to do with the connection between what we're seeing with individuals nervous about fires caused by unhoused individuals and potentially the arroyos, and that there might be that there is some piece of this where that mitigation is going to come into play. Is that accurate?
We have been in talks about that, Madam Chair, about trying to do some stuff. We haven't actually looked at the projects 100% yet, whether that be something that we do in-house with my division, or we try and contract it out to have it done. But there are talks currently, you know, that we're trying to figure out the best way to do that.
Wonderful, thank you so much. I didn't have any other further questions. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Councilman Villarreal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I actually spoke earlier with staff and Ellen and I, and really my question was trying to understand why, I think MNERD is a funny acronym, but why the New Mexico Energy, Minerals, and Natural Resources Department decided to change from a JPA with us to an MOA. And I thought it was a good explanation, so I don't know if you all could just share why that change occurred.
Madam Chair, Councilwoman Villarreal, thank you for the question. So that change came about, you know, really it's MNERD's preference. They're just moving away from JPAs in general and moving all of their contracts over to MOAs. You know, our legal's feeling on the matter was that this could have been a contract amendment to the JPA. And the amendment really centers on the different payment provisions here, or provisions for having work completed. The major difference here in the MOA compared to the JPA is that we can propose, if this is approved, we can propose work plans to State Forestry, assuming everyone signs off on it. They can then hire a contractor and pay them directly, rather than us having to go through our procurement. And yeah, so similar to what Mr. Romero was speaking of, it eliminates a bit of red tape and allows us to get things done faster.
Thank you for that. And from what I understood is the JPA process for the state, they have to go up to the Department of, is it the Finance Department? There's just more steps for them to approve the funding, like you just stated, versus being able to administer it more, not frequently, but just more efficiently.
Correct. My understanding is once this agreement would be signed by their cabinet secretary, that allows not just emergency management or wildland, but any city division that deals with land management to work directly with state forestry to approve work plans and hire contractors, whether that's for doing mechanical or manual thinning or just, you know, chipping material and hauling it away. And we can use funds that the state has plenty of right now from USDA to do that.
Good to know. Thank you for adding that to the conversation. And that's all I have.
Thank you so much. Any other questions or comments? And if not, can I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Motion and a second. Can I please have a roll call?
Counselor Chavez?
Yes.
Counselor Lee Garcia?
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia?
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal?
Yes.
Chair Cassidy?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you so much. Moving on to item D, this is request for approval to enter into an exclusive negotiation agreement between the City of Santa Fe and the Santa Fe Art Institute for the purpose of performing due diligence activities and negotiating terms for land and building disposition and redevelopment of the Midtown Visual Arts Center pursuant to the city's request for proposal number 23-17-P. We have Lee Logston, the Midtown Asset Development Manager. Is Daniel Hernandez here on Zoom?
Chair, yes, he's on the Zoom.
And Daniel Hernandez, Midtown Redevelopment Project Manager, is on Zoom. If we could get those screens on. Councilor Garcia, you pulled this. I will send it over to you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Logston and Mr. Hernandez, whenever you pop up virtually. I'm assuming this is going to follow the same kind of path we did with the prior negotiation agreement, the ENA, that we did for the film space. Am I correct? So are we going to have a executive session? Are we planning on having an executive session to ask some questions?
Members of the committee and Councilor Garcia, yes, that is the plan. That was talked about at Finance Committee, that, you know, one of the councilors had a number of questions that could not be discussed in public, and yes, we, as staff, we feel like this is going to follow that same path.
Okay.
And Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, I have talked to City Attorney's Office to see if we can set that up.
Okay, that'd be great, and I'd be in full support of that, just because I know I have some questions that fall into that bucket, but I've got a couple that I'll ask, and if they do fall into that bucket, just say, go ahead and wait till the executive session meeting. So, first question is, when did we complete the RFP process for this particular proposal?
I can certainly answer. Do we have Daniel, or are we still having trouble getting him in here? Oh, okay.
Looks like just needs to unmute. Oh, right now he's an attendee, so we do need to have him as a panelist.
In the meantime, Councilor Garcia and committee, the original due date for, so the RFPs, all three of them for Midtown, were issued on December 1st of last year. The original due date for them was the beginning of February, and we did extend those dates. So the proposals were due to us on For this one, March 1st. We spaced them a couple days. The others were March 2nd and 3rd. So the RFP process was over in the sense that, you know, any proposals we could get had come in by that date.
Okay. And so, given that these were submitted to us, I'm assuming by that due date, they could have been submitted prior. That gives us roughly 4 months from now to the review, the whole review process. Did it take the 4 months? I'm just wondering why such a long period from due date to recommendations for an ENA to us.
Daniel, are you there? Do you want to take that one?
I just sent him there he is.
There
Hi,
he is.
Daniel.
Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. I appreciate that clarification. On the topic of the RFP, is that document still public? Are folks able to still access what we requested in the RFP?
Yes, Counselor, that, it is in the packet tonight. To try and keep individual pieces, you know, rather than having a 400-page packet, I did memo, ENA agreement, and all other attachments. That RFP is available there right now. Excuse me. It's also available on the city website at the procurement page, and then it is available on midtownsantafe.org, which is kind of the website that we keep going concurrently with all this.
Thank you, Mr. Loxton. We spoke about the committee. Are we able to name the members that were part of the review committee, or is that a executive session question?
Counselor, that would be an executive session question, as well as, you know, the score and things like that. Those are certainly things we can answer at that time.
Okay, but in due time, after we're done potentially with, if we move forward, all of this can become public.
Yeah, Madam Chair, Councilor Garcia, it's a good question. Once the ENA is signed and we're at disposition, all of those documents become public, including the committee members, including the evaluation document. So once all the disposition agreements are done, all of that becomes public.
Great. Thank you, Mr. Brown. I appreciate that. I guess last question, and don't necessarily, not seeking specifics potentially around names. Are you able to inform us if there was more than one applicant, if there was 2, 3, 4, 5, without identifying applicants?
Counselor Garcia and members of the committee, no, we cannot at this time.
Okay, and that would be part, I'm assuming, Mr. Brown, of that. Once there's that big public release of information, that would be part of that.
That is correct. That is correct.
Okay, and so I think the remainder of my questions are directed towards executive session. So I'm assuming it'll probably be similar to last time.
Exactly.
During the
Yeah.
next governing body meeting, and, okay.
Yeah. And Councilor Garcia, if I could just add one more. So the proposals that were submitted are not public, but the people who submitted them, that will remain public. That make sense?
So their applications won't be public even after the fact?
The applications will not be public because it's a procurement rule. You can't see the contents of their proposal, but we will release who the proposers were. So if you'd like to reach out to those proposers, you can reach out to them. And it's the same thing we had to do when we did the initial development proposals, whereas they're still private proposals because some of it's IP on their part. So we can't share that. That's the reason why. So.
Understandable. Okay, well, that's all the questions I have. Thank you, Mr. Loxton. Thank you, Mr. Hernandez. Thank you, Mr. Brown.
Thanks so much, Counselor. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Counselor Lee Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Logston, can you elaborate a little bit on the timeline of where we're at with this? Obviously, it's here for discussion at committee, but it will be going to governing body as an executive session discussion. And then is our target to try to finalize this by?
Daniel, do you want to take that?
It's starting with the finance committee related to public works. That will also Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you so much, Counselor. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? And if not, can I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. May I please have a roll call?
Counselor Chavez? Yes. Counselor Lee Garcia?
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia?
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal?
Yes.
Chair Cassett?
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you so much. All right, moving along to item G. This is consideration of resolution 2023- to be numbered later, sponsored by Councilor Michael Garcia. It's a resolution proposing a ballot question to be submitted to the city's voters during the November 7th, 2023 regular local election regarding amending the city's charter to limit the mayor's ability to vote when there is a tie. Oh, that's really great. When did that happen? Do you want to read it into the record so I don't botch it? Oh, okay. Spanish might be wrong. Yeah, but is it saying the same thing? I think the problem is that it's not saying the same thing. It looks like it is. Yeah. Go ahead. You'll have a much better accent than I will.
All right, so the Spanish interpretation of that would say, una resolución que propone agregar una pregunta a la boleta electoral que se presentará a los votantes de la ciudad durante las elecciones locales ordinarias del 7 de noviembre de 2023 con respecto a la enmienda de la Carta Orgánica de la Ciudad o City Charter para limitar la capacidad del alcalde de votar cuando hay un empate. That is the Spanish translation.
Thanks, Counselor. Appreciate that. And thank you to whoever put the Spanish translation in there. Let's keep doing that. I don't have any questions. We had a robust discussion about this in finance. As I said there, I think that the separation of powers is one of the key issues that we really need to look at in setting up our charter. But I think that just more time and really digging through what this looks like at the whole should be done before this goes on to the charter. So definitely agree with revisiting and relooking at this, but as I've said with most of these, just I would prefer more time before I would feel comfortable putting this on the ballot. So that was all that I pulled it for. Any other questions or comments? And if not, can I have a motion? Oh, thank you for tapping me, Councilor Lee Garcia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I too just want to say a few words in regards to this. I know it was one of the recommendations that was given to us by the Charter Review Commission, and I think it needs to really be looked at. I think that I do have some concerns around it as well. I listened in on the discussion of finance, and I can understand breaking a tie And so I don't know how that really works in terms of our current situation, but needs some work. And I just wish we had a little bit more time to try to get this worked out before we went to discussion on putting it forth. Just my comments, I do think I support this at this moment, but we'll see what comes forth at the next opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Counselor Chavez?
Thank you, Chair Cassett. Actually, I don't even know if it's appropriate that I speak to multiple things, but I'm going to try to keep it here. I agree with getting to work on some of the charter recommendations. I know that I have voted for past items that we've seen in front of us. I'm in this place with this. I also think that there needs to be more of a thought process. I think that we're missing some things. And in other items, which I'll speak to next, I also think that I don't know why we're prolonging a process that might not even need to be prolonged by being put on a ballot. I feel like if it's a recommendation that's appropriate for our city or to make us run better, then let's just get to work on it. And we have the committee process that involves the public. We have things in place so that, this can be expedited, especially if it is something that is what I believe, which is the next item, is very important for the city to look at. So I have had mixed emotions about a lot of these items because I think that there's work that has to be done. I'm not sure if the process of rushing to get it on the ballot right now without a thorough thought process or even putting it on the ballot when not necessary because we could just get to work on making that difference immediately is the appropriate route. And I will say that it's been hard for me. I've gone back and forth because I've struggled with what's more appropriate. It's difficult. I appreciate Councilor Garcia bringing this forward and respecting the recommendations. I'm just not sure I agree with the route. And so I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions, comments from members of the committee? And if not, can I have a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. May I please have a roll call?
Counselor Garcia? I'm sorry, Counselor Chavez?
No.
Counselor Lee Garcia?
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia?
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal?
Yes, and I'd like to explain my vote.
Chair Cassett?
No.
Motion passes.
Councilman Villarreal?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think our discussion in finance, there were some good points made. There is a bigger package here other than just voting, mayor's ability to vote. When there's a tie, there were some other pieces that were provided by the Charter Commission. And I think those are valid and that we need to look at those holistically. And I did vote for this because I still feel like it warrants a discussion and that it can be part of that discussion of one of the items, of the many items that we're actually hearing as potential ballot measures for next week. There was a good point brought up by Councilor Rivera that, and I agree with, it is important to, when they did make the change to have the mayor vote on all items, it did show legitimacy of having a mayor be accountable of their votes on certain items versus just voting for when there's a tie. So I think there's some validity of having a mayor and all of us actually vote on items and that the public knows where we stand on various issues. So I think that was a good point brought up. And so I wanted to just say I voted for this so that we can move it forward so that it can be heard at this special meeting. And if there's any other additional information that helps us make our decision, then that would be helpful. But until then, I think it's important to have it with the full lineup of ballot measures that we'll be considering next week. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman. All right, moving on to our last item pulled, item I. Consideration of a resolution 2023- to be numbered later, sponsored by Councilor Michael Garcia. It's a resolution proposing 2 ballot questions to be submitted to the city's voters during the November 7th, 2023 regular local election to amend the city's charter to require the governing body to establish an Office of Equity and Inclusion and a Human Rights Commission in ordinance. Marcy Iannarino, am I doing it right? Please do, for all of us. That'd be wonderful.
Good evening, thank you. I'm Marcy, and then you focus on the middle, Anna. So Iana, and then you put Reno on the end.
Iannarino.
It's a Sicilian name, so pretend Iannarino.
Oh, I like it. Thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome.
Thanks for being here. Councilman Villarreal, I'll pass over to you.
Did you pull this also?
I did too, but I
Okay.
usually go last because
Sure.
that's how things work.
Okay, so I like the concept of these ballot measures. I think both of the ideas are to establish an Office of Equity and Inclusion and a Human Rights Commission makes sense. One thing that I'm trying to understand in my head and also get kind of legal clarity is how this would work and the way it's written and how it would affect any kind of efforts that are happening now. For instance, like the Office of Equity and Inclusion, we're still working on a resolution that will establish that office, and it's close to being introduced. And what I'm wondering, and I don't think anybody here will be able to answer it because I think it's a legal question, is that well, 2 things. One is that this indicates that that this would require the governing body to establish an Office of Equity, Inclusion, and Human Rights Commission in ordinance or by ordinance. And currently, establishing the OEI is in resolution form. And does that make a difference as we move forward with what we have now? It's in its current form as a resolution. And if it states it's an ordinance, does that affect how we're, the ability to move forward with what we've worked on for a while? So there's that. And then the other question is the name itself might change. You know, we started with Office of Equity and Inclusion when we had it in the chart resolution at the beginning of the year. And so I guess my question is if that name changes, which it might not stay the Office of Equity and Inclusion, how does that affect the ballot measure? And if it's stated in our, what is considered city constitution as the Office of Equity and Inclusion, can we then change it later on or through the resolution we're working on? And so if there's a I don't know if there's a conflict there, because from what I understood is anything that's written in the ballot measure is kind of codified. And so if there's a change in the name, I don't know if that is possible. So those are 2 things that I'm curious about and would need to know more about as we move forward with this. The other thing is there is a possibility to start to create these 2 entities by resolution and or ordinance. I'm still confused about that right now as it stands. The thing that I think is important is it doesn't, one important reason why it could be codified through a ballot measure is because, or ballot amendment, is that the right way to say it? Ballot question is because we don't want things, important offices like this and the work to shift when there's an administration that doesn't agree with that kind of work and the importance of that work. So we've seen that happen where offices and even the Office of Intercultural Affairs was created during a certain administration back in the 80s, and it went through and had a very important role all the way through like the mid-2000s. And then there was an administration that didn't think it was important or wanted it to kind of transition into something else. And so that office no longer exists. And so there were some good outcomes from that office, but it doesn't exist, and I think we need something to replace that office. So having it as a ballot question actually solidifies that these will stay, as long as it's in our charter, will stay as entities. So I see the benefit, and so that's why I would like to move it on to, again, the special meeting, so we have for consideration, and then have my questions answered at some point before we get to, or maybe at the meeting, but just making sure there's no conflict there. Thank you.
Marcy, did you have any response at this time, or should we wait for the city attorney, McSherry?
I can address a couple of pieces of that, and then we can always have Aaron or our city attorney weigh in on the legal pieces. And I should have thanked you, Madam Chair, for the question. So I do think that one of the things that you're raising, Councilor Villarreal, is something that you guys, that the councilors will have to grapple with, is the concept of staying power, because it's in charter, which is amended by a different process. And so that was in the Charter Commission's report, is they wanted the commission and the Office of Equity and Inclusion included in the charter so that it had staying power that would give it longevity past admit the whims of different administrations. So on the one hand, that's that piece. The other side of it would be the concept of flexibility and operational ability to make decisions about, say, a name. Like if we were to do the ballot measure, the way that it's written, it would be called the Office of Equity and Inclusion in the charter until the charter was amended. And the ballot questions are due to the county by August 29th. So it would be difficult to change the name on the ballot question that would appear before the voters before a different resolution would be introduced with a different name in it. And then another piece I can address is that resolutions can resolve as their action to establish something in ordinance. The high-end excise tax is a good example of that, where we have an ordinance and we also have a resolution. So, and we could resolve to set it up in ordinance and then work on a bill to describe the details of that ordinance later. This is my understanding. And again, I'm always happy to be, added to or corrected by the city attorney staff.
Thank you so much, Marcy. Appreciate it. Any other questions or comments from members of the committee? Councilor Chavez?
Thank you, Chair Cassett. So this is an item that I think is hard for me because I think that this work can be done by us and doesn't need to go to the voters. I understand about the longevity, I understand all that, but the work is going to be defined by the city still. It is, let's be transparent. The work is going to be defined by the city, whether the office exists and we call it what it is, and it is there forever because it's in the charter. The work behind it is going to change and it's going to look different based on the needs. And I feel like this work doesn't need to go to the voters because of that. Like I want it to be meaningful. I want what is presented in front of them to truly be meaningful. And one, meaning comes with education. And when we have a lot of questions like this, I'm getting a little worried about how that education is going to look and them actually making choices that they understand and are meaningful and isn't just something that they're getting through because it's become a long list. Especially when we can take responsibility for the work involved in, for example, these two items. So like I said, I've been torn about a lot of things because everything is very important. I agree with that. I agree with the charter recommendations. I do. I feel like the thought process needs to go into it a little more. I think that we also have to keep in mind the voters' perspective when they have something like this in front of them. I think that's a very important piece. And if we want to take something to them with meaning, then how do we present it to them so it has meaning? I'm not sure we've thought that through. Yeah, so I wanted just to emphasize, I guess, my last point that I did with the last item that we reviewed is just, I'm not sure there's enough thought that has gone into it. I'm not sure it's even appropriate right now. So, thank you.
Thank you, Counselor. Any other questions, comments from any other members of the committee?
Move to approve.
Second.
And I'll make my comments. Didn't have the opportunity yet. They've pretty much been made. I also think this is an extremely important piece of the puzzle that we've been discussing for, what, a year now? How long has it been since chart came out? It's a little less. But similar concerns, just really wanting to understand the details, how the interplay is, what is the flexibility, how do we actually, I think to Councilman Villarreal's point that balance between longevity but also flexibility. And I just think that more time to explore this before deciding whether or not it goes onto the ballot for a charter amendment, or whether, and if so, what that would look like precisely. So that's all. If there are no other questions or comments, then a roll call vote, please.
Counselor Chavez?
No.
Counselor Lee Garcia?
Yes.
Counselor Michael Garcia?
Yes.
Counselor Villarreal?
Yes.
Chair Cassett?
No.
Motion passes.
Thank you so much. All right, moving on to matters from staff. I will send it over to you. Any matters today?
Madam Chair, members of the committee, thank you. I just wanted to give a few updates on things that are happening in the Community Health and Safety Department at the request of Madam Chair, which I think is a great opportunity for you to get a little window into what we're doing. I know there's been a lot of interest and curiosity about the Safe Outdoor Space project. I wanted to let this body know that our request for applications is out. It closes on August 25th. At that point, an evaluation committee made up of staff and members of citizen-seated committees such as Public Safety, Human Services Committee, and the Veterans Advisory Board will be reviewing those applications from site owners and service providers. There are two streams, and then the decision will be made, and we'll be able to inform you all and the public, depending on the size of the contracts, which we anticipate to be large, frankly, because of the nature of the project. They will come before you for a vote on the contracts, and we'll also be able to inform you of the locations of these possible one or more projects. And then I wanted to also let you know that we had a very successful Built for Zero relaunch hosted by the Thornburg Foundation with our partners from the S3 Housing Initiative. I think, it's hard work to work on ending homelessness and getting data. And we have a new wonderful executive director of the New Mexico Coalition to End Homelessness. Her name is Monet Silva. In fact, I'd love to have her come and present to you all on the work of the coalition at some point. Very committed to getting good data, which really leads in the Built for Zero model toward creation of units. And, you have to, I guess, believe it when you see it, and hopefully we can convince Ed Romero that this is possible too, because he knows how hard it is to create units and does an amazing job of that. So I also had a few sort of crossover things from our Public Safety Committee that I mentioned when I gave the update to them. We had a very successful airport simulation of a crash exercise last Saturday. Our fire, county fire, our police, our emergency management. Kyle Morgan did a fantastic job of planning that and having all agencies practice a response to a plane crash at the airport. As you know, we had a real plane crash in the county recently, and it was also we also had our city fire staff here, Chief Josh Mihalsik got a commendation for his and his team's work in being incident command on that event. We were also thanked very heartily from the county for our leadership and partnership in addressing that real-life crash, which, by the way, happened while we were planning the tabletop exercise at the airport. So it was very interesting, but I think we can have a lot of confidence in our public safety response. The FAA is very pleased with our ability to respond. Of course, you never know until you know, but I think what was underscored for me is that, we have the key to all of this is great communication within the team, between police and fire, emergency management, between city and county. If we don't have good communication between the city and the county, our public safety response will suffer. So I'm just also grateful to report the successful transition of our public safety radio system to the State Department of IT's public safety radio mothership, if you will. We're seeing a lot more efficiencies in the field and success with our first responders having good radio communications. Our chief of police can now be on the public safety radio in the parking lot of PD, which is great. We're not seeing hard outages, and we met our target of getting this all done before Zozobra. And a special shout out to Joe Abeta from IT and Audrey Abeta from IT and the whole team at IT that did an incredible job helping us get to this point, and that too required a lot of communication and coordination with the county. And it is a quality of life issue, I think, so I'll just mention it here. Finally, wanted to just reiterate that reiterate from what I said back in the budget hearings, that our focus in community health and safety this year is really about strategic planning and solidifying the identity of the department and the performance measures and the goals that we're working toward all together to create a more healthy and safe community. And we're, to that end, doing an overall strategy, and we'd love to welcome participation from you and coordination with that, and other counselors on, mission, vision, performance measures, strategies within community health and safety, pulling all the existing studies from the various departments together, and also, very importantly, taking it through as many levels of the organization as we can, doing ground-up studies from our employees. Who are you? What do you do? Why do you do it? What do you do to create a healthier and safe community for us? And questions like that. So I'm excited about that. We're launching it probably with a storytelling project. And then that will also include some key missing deep dives that we currently have. One into a strategy for our alternative response unit and where it should be and what its expanse should look like, as well as our recreation department. Where should we have recreation facilities in our city? What should they look like? And pulling that all together into the big picture of the community health and safety department. So with that, I'm happy to stand for any questions.
I don't think we get to
Don't do that.
questions.
Sorry.
No, it's just
I'm not
it's a
happy to do
one-way
that.
update because it's
I
not on
would
the
have been
agenda.
happy if
Right.
it would have happened.
But thank you.
Talk to me
Just-
offline
right.
about any of that.
Director Brown, and as Kira mentioned, this is, or Director Ochoa mentioned, that this is something that I've asked them to do is, we have some of these presentations that come, and then we don't necessarily get an update. So if there is something in particular that you'd want a little blurb, let me know, and I can let them know. Thank you. Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the council. She's busier than I am, but I have a couple of things I'd like to share. We are in the process of preparing an FY24 arts and programs calendar from the Arts and Culture Department. I'm hoping to have that ready by the end of the month. There's lots of opportunities for you as policymakers to connect with our community, arts and culture community, with all the cultural events we have, all the programming we have, arts and public places programming. So we're hoping to have that done by the end of the month, so I'd like to share that. And then on top of that, I'd like to also note that we have chosen a new arts and culture director. Her name is Chelsea Johnson. She officially will start on September 5th, and I'd like to have her come to the September 6th meeting here to introduce her to you, and you can ask her some questions about her background. She was selected after 12 applications, 12 interviews, and 3 rounds of interview cycles. We are in the process now of doing interviews for our Assistant Director of Arts and Culture. We had 49 applicants, and we narrowed it down to 9. We narrowed it down to 28, then to 9, but we're now going through the cycle of the final 9, the cycle of the final 9 interviews for the Assistant Director. We have cross-department collaboration going on to work on guidelines for outdoor dining. So I have a weekly Tiger team that I meet with 4 departments. We're working on outdoor dining guidelines. We have a couple of restaurants here actually in the plaza area that are actually our least right now. Upcoming events, tomorrow is the Southside Feria event, which the Office of Economic Development is working with the Chamber on. And then, of course, this weekend is Indian Market, so you want to know where to park, think about that, because starting tomorrow, parking in this area here will be restricted, starting, I think, at 2 p.m. So if you're coming downtown, Lincoln, Washington, et cetera, will be closed off. They'll red tag the parking meters. Also, on the Midtown front, also, the MRA director recruitment is out. I'm hoping to get the, they call them LOEs, the letter, the eligible candidate list on the 28th of August. So I'll start interviewing for that. We'll have that. Hopefully, it'll take me about a month before I get all the interviews done and then go through the HR process. And then the Office of Economic Development, Housing, and some departments of Community Health and Safety have successfully moved to Marcy Street. So hopefully you'll get to come and visit us at 100 and 123 Marcy, which is just in the next 2 blocks up on the left-hand side if you're traveling east.
We're at 119.
119.
You're very welcome.
119. Yeah, the 119, and then the top floor is 123. Oh, that way, yeah, I'm sorry. It's in that direction, sorry. And some departments of Public Works and MPO have moved to the old Monica Robel School, so they're successfully there now. So that has cleaned out the Market Station building. We just received a letter of intent, speaking of Market Station, we've received a letter of intent from a bioscience company who is interested in leasing our boneyard space, which is the empty space on just above REI. So we're talking to them about that. One of the other things, 2 more things, the Economic Development Department is hosting a monthly resource webinar series for businesses and entrepreneurs. And their next one that's coming up is for collateral assistance. The state of New Mexico has just launched a collateral assistance program, and it's an opportunity for businesses and entrepreneurs if they're looking for like different capital options. And this is just one line, and I talk about this word capital stack. This is one line that they can think of for sustaining their business, doing collateral assistance. And so Eric Rentz Whitmore on our team is going to be doing that. That is on September 7th. And then lastly, I just wanted to say that I'm very proud of our team in the city and the public schools team on the work-based learning project. We just closed the spring and summer cohort. We had about 100 students, and we're about to ramp up for fall and winter. And I remember Councilor Garcia said that he would be interested in talking to us because we may run out of funding at the end of next year, but it has been super successful. And the testimonies from these young people who attended, talked about their experience as an intern was just powerful. We had a convening about 10 days ago, and it was just a powerful, powerful evening with hearing these young people who talked about their experience, their first job, being able to shake someone's hand, being able to be comfortable after they've shaken someone's hand, and the experience they had working in a place where they learned something new. But the biggest thing is that they all had to say that they loved getting paid. So that was a big plus. So with that, I conclude, and that's what I have for an update.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Any matters from the committee?
Just a
Councilman
question.
Villarreal.
Is Chelsea Johnson a former American pole vaulter?
No,
Okay,
she's a
just
little bit pixier.
Just Googling. Any other matters from the committee? No matters from the chair. I don't know why it says no meeting scheduled. We definitely have another meeting scheduled. Our next meeting will be on Wednesday, September 6th, and at 6:57 we are adjourned. Thank you so much.